It's a comics that influence. I believe this is episode 13. What do you got going on over there, Jake?
I got two Mike Ploogs and just kind of disparate, but I'm going to go over the art of Mike Ploog in typical 1970s comics that I had laying around.
Awesome. I have a copy of Red Room by Ed Piskor, who's one half of the hosts of Cartoonist Kayfabe. One of the reasons I got a hold of this was I really liked the cover, believe it or not. I love the pencil.
Okay.
So do you want me to go first? Do you want me to go first? Or do you want to go first? All right. So if you're not a watcher of the best comic book podcast on YouTube, Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg do Cartoonist Kayfabe. They're like 4 years old. I'll just say, in all honesty, not a huge fan of their work. Jim Rugg basically does kind of manga-ish young adult, like his skateboarding Street Angel. This is the thing that's coming to an end for Jim Rugg. For Ed Piskor, which is his Red Room, which is about horror, gore, snuff films, the dark web, and all that, But the reason I really want to talk about this comic is I really do like, almost to a point, love his process, because you hear these guys talking about their process, even when they're talking about other people's comics, historically speaking, or to the such. But the thing about it that I'm mesmerized is the technical proficiency of step-by-step old school making a comic. I can't speak directly to each one of the points that he personally makes, but I felt it was time for me to just go ahead and get the final art. And my thing is that the original art is just one more step closer to the final art. The final art is the comic book. So I also like the fact that he puts this very light old paper screen and then whitens the text so it's more readable. I would still like to see this be a little less white. But that's just a total nitpicking thing.
No,
but his story...
the pages are bright, but they have a lot of rendering on them, which reminds me kind of like the later Underground, like Kim Deitch's, in terms of the shading and hatching. But from this view that I can see, I made you the double page spread on my viewfinder. It seems like very rich. Contrast between the overall lightness and then a little bit of tones and then very dark. So
yes,
it's just a natural balance of that. So that's a good artist right there.
I do believe he delivers. Whether you are a fan of said genre, snuff film, gore, slasher, that's not without saying that if you're a comic book maker, I do believe you have to pull the trigger and go ahead and support the artist by making a purchase, but also see the final art, to see how everything is put together, and steal when you can. In other words, notice things in a way that you would say, oh, wow, I could do something like that. Or if I did it, I would do it this way. It's a part of the comic book process. Or even to the point, question, how did he do that? Or when does he do that? Is that pre-Photoshop, or so on and so forth? But
I hate when you can spot Photoshop. Honestly, anything that you can spot, I mean, this also has kind of like a Mad Magazine quality to me. Like kind of like really um, like facile, um, anatomy and but very creative stuff. And um, I think a great presentation, a great balance. Like, look, I noticed the word balloons are much brighter white than the rest of the
Yeah,
page.
they're cut out. They're cut out. So the page itself is of this light, almost a flesh tone uh, layer, and then the word balloons themselves are just knocked out white. So
And is this the same kayfabe one that is doing the grand design thing where it goes over the whole history of like Hulk and
well,
the
they
whole history?
all do. So Tom Scully has done the Fantastic Four. Ed Piskor has done X-Men, and Jim Rugg just recently did Hulk, which I did get a copy of his. Uh, so I will bring that out at some
So these
point.
guys
And
have relationships at Marvel basically,
oh
and
yeah, oh yeah, oh
and
yeah,
but when I saw that in the bookstore, um, it was a very cartoony style because a lot of it was very small, like almost like ant-like figures, right? Teeny tiny, right? It reminded you of um, you know, like Gilbert Shelton using every inch of the page with a Fat Freddy's
yeah,
cat, like getting smaller and
yeah,
smaller and smaller. That's what the grand design kind of seemed to me because there was so much storytelling. I think the
yes,
challenge for them was like how do you tell less because they want to cover every issue of a series, but Fantastic Four has hundreds of them, and you just can't do it all. After a while, it just looks like disparate threads of
Well, it's funny because I was introduced to Cartoonist Kayfabe by a friend of mine who's a comic book artist, a brilliant one, Carlos Torres. And when he told me I had to watch this podcast on YouTube called Cartoonist Kayfabe, I have to say the purist in me was like, well, I'm not a cartoonist. I'm a comic book artist. That in my head, I didn't say it out loud, but even when I started watching it, I'm like, well, wait a second. These guys aren't cartoonists. They're comic book artists. But when you stay with them, you see why they want to be in reference to cartooning, in that their work reflects the art form of cartooning. In other words, boiling things down into a quick referencing point to then panel out a story. The artistry is another separate conversation, but I really do believe they are mastering the story art form called cartooning. And it is in the fact that they are spending every day. I mean, they shoot these videos in advance and then edit them and release them every day, looking at the total landscape, and not only American but international, Japanese manga, European, and then holding a larger conversation. I would only then say in um, I don't know how I would
Can I ask you a
describe
question
what I'm
about those
about.
guys? Do,
Okay,
do you
if I can
know?
answer.
Do you know the finances? Like, are these guys
No, no,
making money to support themselves, or are they
oh
still?
yeah, most definitely. They're full time cartoonists. Yes,
But
yes, and
but
have
but
been
but the
have been for a
podcast
while.
though. But what do you
Oh,
think
I don't know.
the finances of the podcast are though?
Oh, I
Because
don't
they talk
know.
about
I
they talk about the kayfabe effect where you see all the comics, all the copies of a comic that they spotlight get sold out, and I understand that. But that could be like every comic on eBay, so that could be like in the tens, that are available at any given time. So I just wonder because I hope they're making a ton of money. They seem like they do a lot of work, and it's a labor of love, and they have the greatest connections. They're working for Marvel and DC. That's a total success story. That every comic book person would aspire to. And they're not only like geniuses of the comic industry and history of the art and the storytelling and the writing and everything, but also they're making comics on their own at a decent professional level.
They eclipse me in knowledge, and I have literally being on my own podcast with you have become very self-conscious in trying to toe some sort of know-it-all line, because the two of them, I think, in sharing their enthusiasm, really outweighs a lot of individuals that are out there trying to toe a line about comics. But I think the other thing is that they're a part of the uh, uh, image comic generation. So when I got out of college, it was in 1992. I came home back to where I was from in Wilmington, Delaware. I was told before I went off to college that this art center, D'Antonio Art Center, that I took classes at pre-college, actually to help me get into art school. The owner, Marietta, said, come back after school and you can teach whatever you want. I came back to her with a flyer that I had made saying I wanted to teach comics. Now, I had thought
Right.
it was going to be, and I had been out of comics for 4 years straight. I was still carrying an affinity for European Mobius specifically, and getting every month or whenever it came out, Heavy Metal Magazine. I ended up within 6 months getting 36 students. I was running classes 4 times a week. I separated the students into like positions of like, well, basically you could come to any class, but I could only hold like 14 at a time. So the thing, though, I had come across immediately was when I was towing my line with the Marvel method of making comic books, how to draw comics the Marvel way with Stan Lee and John Buscema. They were throwing back at me in my face the Image Boys, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, so on and so forth. So I was getting educated by them, and it became a really awesome open dialogue. A couple of my students, Pat Higgins, is out in comics. Some are no longer in comics, but had immediately gone into college, got out of college, and had made some comics. But when I run into them, because I'm still in my hometown here, Wilmington, Delaware, still have a connection to comics, work on stuff here and there, but are still buying comics. But all I want to say is it definitely has, they're in a really wonderful place, sarcastically saying, is that in the 90s was the end of comics. Because at the same time in 92, I think by 93, you and I start making a connection and we start working together. If not, I was already doing black and white work for Dark Fantasies, Harris Comics, and so on and so forth. So, and it was all kind of like ghosty work, finishing here and lettering there and inking this page and panel and that stuff. So I was still making my way in the world. But I really get a kick out of the kind of lingo I'm getting even deeper into when it comes into like maybe this last stand of comics, which was the like 96, 97 time, where then things, the internet is obviously coming into play. By the time you get to 2000, shit's just running off in its own direction. But really, all of their reference points on Cartoonist Kayfabe is in and around the mid 90s and then before. So then it goes back into the 80s. Power Comics also does the same thing, looking deeper into that, and then just the historical. So I have to just say I get a great appreciation in watching these guys and listening to them. And I have to say it did inspire myself in wanting to work with you in this format of thing. I'm not going to flip through the whole comic because I want to pay respect to you, the individual, to support other comic artists. even if Ed Piskor is making mucho dinero and buying yachts and Cristal and all that, whatever it is, it still needs to be
Right
a
there.
part of
That
the
page.
circle.
Go back to that. Go back that one last page. Yeah. So from up here, it looks like Don Simpson because
Yeah.
light, really light overall pages because you could rip through them quicker, but also popping out of the panels. And I don't know if this was just a coincidence or if he had checked out Don Simpson stuff, but
Oh, he
you know,
has. They talk about he's made it very clear where he leans in the most, but that's just specific to his art form. I think the other part of it is that they're constantly talking about their growth. Um, the he's like I said, he's finishing Red Room. I think the last issue gets released and it goes through all of its collection recollecting. He's with Fantagraphics on that, but he's been talking about doing old school comic strips and doing a weekly or a daily
huh,
or something. He's trying to figure it out. And he's been at every evening saying he's been reading, Rick Kirby, the Peanuts, every evening just to kind of get into that zone. And I have a lot of respect for that because all of us have that choice at the end of our days. Do we just plop in front of the television, watch a bunch of nonsense, play some video games or something? Or do we actually use that time to close ourselves down for a reset of sleep to get up and then attack our art? And if it so happens to be in comics, then you would want to be enriching yourself and hearing other people talk about them, or like you and I have been doing, uh, looking more into the exploitation movie business influencing us. So
yeah, I remember
um,
I was full time doing comics for like 5 minutes in like 92, 93. And it was fun because you're finally realizing your dream, but you're on a deadline. And you want to do your best quality, especially at the beginning. And it just can't compete with for the average comic book creator, it cannot compete with the regular business world for making money. So and there is a lot of competition out there. It's a very crowded field.
yeah,
And a lot of diversity of ideas out there and styles. So setting yourself apart in the sea of this, it's interesting. But sometimes people find you over time, and sometimes people find you through other media. um if you want me to go through my
oh
plugs,
please, please.
I could start that off here. But always great discussing with you, Kurt, because you're a lot more up on the nowadays. I think I'm really trapped in the 70s and the 60s, of
Jake,
my.
can you drop everything down? Just bring
Sure.
it in. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
great review. Thank
I
you.
was I was trying to get mine on full screen, but I
No,
guess that
you're
just
good. You're
happens
good.
automatically. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
you're
wanted
fine.
yeah. So, starting with let's see, which this one's got to be the earliest because it's 20 cents. Um, this is Call the Destroyer, which is a Conan wannabe. You probably know tons about Cull, that you could share with us, but just going into number 11 in the November 1973 issue, you see Mike Ploog here showing complete mastery of barbarian comics. This is great proportion, unbelievable, like Bern Hogarth shading, right? Like the
Yeah,
darks and the negatives and the positives and everything.
anatomy.
And then all of this real complimentary background stuff, really took the time like to etch in all these little baubles and things, attention to detail, right, on all this stuff. And great. One big complaint about art is that the head is too big or too little, but it's just right. And so you know I definitely see, like, even Tim Vigil, who would come later here. 1973. So um, here we got beautiful setups. This isn't just like an establishing shot of a building. It's, incredible composition, bodies, poses, angles. Don't just take the easy pose. Look at this. They use a panel barrier here. They go across the panel barrier here, and this guy's like a fixture in the tree and the stone. It's crazy. This is like Brunner. I think Ploog and Brunner, probably worked at Marvel like the same time, had very similar styles, right? Ploog,
And interest. They were both sword and sorcery fans or pulp fantasy type stuff.
I think the difference
Cthulhu.
between Frank Brunner and Mike Ploog is that Mike Ploog would sometimes get a little bit more into the flowing cartoony-ish style of Eisner, and Brunner would kind of go into this like more hatching style. He would like start breaking down into like more detailed hatching and cross hatching and stuff. But this is great stuff, and a really good job on the coloring too. You know, um, a lot of this coloring was done by second rate people on the fly. This was colored by L. Lessman, and aside from maybe this yellow splash here, just the color choices, a lot of primaries mixed in, but just varying it. Here you get the light blue coloring, to set the whole layer apart, but there's such good drafting. Look at this with the chicks hanging out, right? And Kull is
Yeah.
like the he's like the king over here. And then we see like here some Tarzan stuff, right? Mountain people. We're flying through. Now this I've seen somewhere before, but this is great. Look at that. Like these stallions, right? Reminds me of the Death Dealer right here. And the
Oh
way that
yeah.
he breaks up the panels, like there is no panels here. This is a montage, right? It's like a movie montage. And then, the it brings your eye from the text, right? It looks like a lot of text in here. See, this is what I think Turbo will be like. So, if we really have a lot of text on a page, you know, like no worse than this. And see how they turn it into yellow background on the text.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could
Yeah, I
do a
like
light
that.
gray, or we could just do
Yep.
gray text. I think light gray background on black. But I also want to figure out ways to get rid of the boxes altogether and just inset text. This page, oh, I know where I saw this page. I scanned this for one of my classes. This is an incredible example of leading the eye, right? You look right here, and then this kind of leads your eye into here. This points to here. This points up to here. This girl's head is sticking out, and it brings you down across. And then this guy's going through a door, to bring you to the next panel. It's great. There's
It's
this is
amazing.
a transition, to bring the eye back over here. This is framed in by foreground elements in a skinny little panel with 4 word balloons. I mean, this is a genius here laying this stuff
Yeah.
out. Right, top of
And
his
you got to
game.
think he's got to be but he might even only be like in his early 20s at this point. If it's 73.
So here's a panel. I gotta get through this. Here's a panel where he's busting down the doors, and look at the great like little ribboning that you see on all these legs in the back, so it doesn't get so busy. All these guys are in the shade. Oh, I love it. Look at all the diagonal motion here. This is crazy diagonal motion. That is so good. Look at the violence and the gore here. Like the colors
He's
didn't
actually
even know.
coming on 30 years old. He was born in 92, so he's 31 when he's working on
Six.
this. So
He was born. What year was he born in?
42.
42. Oh, okay.
42.
So look at this. The speed and the wind effect from these axes and swords turns into blood, and the colorist didn't know what to do. This was like beyond the capacity of the colorist. So the colorist just wrote, just made a sheet of Rubylith, for like just a red like scythe, like I just get some of this blood down here, but you could have went a million ways on this page. Here we're starting to lose a little bit of background, but look how great it is, because like this is something where the background isn't behind the people, it's underneath the people. Isn't this great? Like if you're gonna not do a background in a panel, this is the panel right here to do it in, because you would be looking at the floor, and then same thing here. And again, these like limbs are bringing the eye to the action. Just so good. Look at this. He's still going. This is like ass kicking action, violent, just goes on and on, right? And look at this guy, this dwarfish gnomish guy, hunchback. This is crazy. Look, this reminds you of Barry Windsor Smith, right?
Yeah. Or even Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah, right. That's another one. Brunner and Wrightson are right in that little circle, right?
Yeah, and you're going next into Man Thing, which was Wrightson was doing Swamp Thing, right?
So check this out. It just gets better and better. You think this is a crazy splash where Kull's making his last stand? Then after the ads, you got this guy coming in, and he summons the Thulsa Doom. Right? This is right off the cover of a Black Sabbath album in these years, right? Look at these guys. They're turning into white glowing popsicles. So this is great. Look at the shadow here. He's moving you through everything. This is great, man. I can't believe my eyes. This is just as good as Barry Windsor Smith and Conan and all that.
Very inspirational. It's got me rocking and rolling in my head right now.
Yeah, and so this is Ploog inking Ploog, right? Yeah. Nice. This is masterclass. So you can't keep up that pace though, right? The penciling and the inking. So this must have been a colossal job for him to crank out in the early going.
He might not have been married with kids yet.
All right, so this is 5 cents later. The Man Thing. So this is Man Thing number 6, and he was on since number 1, right?
I can't determine that to be true or not.
Yeah.
I will determine whether it's true or not.
Okay. Well,
with a flash on the screen right now, I'll flash on the screen.
If I had to remember, and noticeably quicker style here. See the difference? This is 1974, and I think this is when the realities of deadlines, get you. This is November 73, and this is June of 74. So
is he inking himself? In that one, it looks like he is, right?
No, he's not.
Okay.
No, okay. And so maybe that's
he might be doing multiple titles. He might be doing 2 titles a month.
Maybe, but you never know if it's somebody else doing the inks, because then they're taking over. So there might be more detail, to this than we're actually getting to see. But it's still good. I just think it's a little bit like left out here, which makes it look cartoony. And this is great. This reminds me of like the Scooby Van kids, right? And and we don't know. We're coming right into the middle of a Steve Gerber story. I loved Steve Gerber. I loved the Defenders under Steve Gerber, and of course Howard the Duck. I was a big fan of Howard the Duck when it was Frank Brunner doing it, and the covers and good art. I think Steve Laialoa was on Howard the Duck. It was great, right? Anyway, Gerber. Yeah, see right here, I'm sure that Mike Ploog's pencils were way better than this. So I think Frank Chiamonte is kind of handicapping us. Also really light black here, and I don't know if that was printed like that or if the paper's just faded over time. but you can see, like, where the film gets cut. And when you have rich blacks, you don't usually see that. Ideally, you want to bump up any black plate you have with 80% magenta anyway. But sometimes you don't have the time to strip in the extra plate of ruby lith on a big piece of acetate. That's how this was created in those days. 4-color acetate ruby lith plates, and then goldenrod stripping. So um, here you had, the same thing, these real cartoony looking faces. And I have a feeling this is supposed to be like a Scooby-Doo feel. You don't see so much Man Thing. He's just like lumbering around, right? And then he's just like, the primal id or something that comes in at the end of the story to smash everything, right? Or to make things melt with the very touch, right? And but he's also representative of the state of like corporate pollution and slime and ooze, the toxic waste fields of New Jersey, right? It's a comment on like the environment, right? He was created out of the mulch and the miasma. So not going to get too deep into the story, but they look like some retro characters here. And the Man Thing is like, just the watcher in the wings, like the protector. Really crazy, right? Just hanging there the whole time. Lurks into the demon that looks into Daryl's eyes and sees the demon that lurks inside him. So the Man Thing is just a conscience hanging over everybody, a specter, not doing anything this whole comic. And look at these characters. Here we got an evil clown guy, right? Maybe we want to take a look at that. And here we see some also like some interesting pseudo backgrounds. They're just like indications that break up the back of the panel without going too depth into establishing texture or background or depth. So yeah, I think he's definitely into a quicker style here. Maybe he's doing more than one title at a time, or maybe he's
Well, he does get scooped up by the movie industry and doing storyboards. So, and they were probably dumping shit tons of cash on him. So,
right.
trying to keep at least a big toe in comics, in
Yep.
case something fell through. He still had somebody to say, "Hey, yeah, we can give you some pages." But he went off to, he worked with Ralph Bakshi
Yep.
on Wizards, and the
Other
opening
stuff too.
screens from our Ralph Bakshi Making a Turbo Pit Fighter comic episode. We actually have him on the title card, Ralph Bakshi. But yeah, he had, yeah, he's one of those unsung heroes. In other words, an individual that brought so much to comics, especially in the '70s. Yet very few people will mention him. But I just think he's just stellar, as well as Frank Brunner. Two guys that were just mammothly just plowing through comics and just making it better.
Wow, look at this. The last page ending here. So here, I don't know if you noticed, but I do have a very light black hit here.
Yeah,
It's very, very
yeah.
poor. So this
That's
is
the
a
plate.
defect in the printer,
Yeah,
and it affected this whole. This was like
section.
a big imposed signature of pages that are cut and put into order. So whatever was on this page was
That's
also
cool.
on this. Whatever was also printed on this page here, but it wasn't
That's
as
cool.
bad down there. So we're just like losing corners of it, and then it gets rich again here. So they either refilled the black, or they were running out here. This is a great layout here. We're getting into the climactic action. Steve Gerber knew the great pacing, of a comic, and so now you're getting your climactic action, and this unfortunately is really light, so it looks terrible. But you have these demonic supervillain types, all three of them fighting the Man Thing at once, and he just like clubs them. He picks one of them up, throws him into the water. He's going after this other one, and the battle ceases. Here we have this. I don't know. They go back into Stargate or
Neptune.
something, and everything is as it was, but he goes back into the sea. Man Thing was a very offbeat comic. And you also had the exact same idea in Swamp Thing in DC. So these
Yeah.
are also like two publishers like Randolph Hearst and Pulitzer going at it back and forth. You saw the same thing with I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, the same thing with the Munsters and the Addams Family. There was always a rival across town that wouldn't let you get away with a concept that was good. They would do the same thing just for the block, and they would take the audience and divide it in half. So a lot of great art here in the 1970s, and this is why I'm trapped. All those names that we mentioned were the stable of Marvel All-Stars, and DC, but also like Neil Adams was just coming into his own at this time. Starlin, who we spoke about in the last episode, and of course, you had Buscema there, both of them. You had Ross Andru working up the ranks, doing Spider-Man. In a couple years after this, John Romita was on Spider-Man at the time. I think Kirby had just left. Kirby was in a pause, and so that left a lot of space, for people to step up. And you had some big names by 1970. Oh my God, from 71, 72, 73. Great covers. It was a real heyday. So I think I love it because I was a kid then, and I'll just like always be hypnotized by those covers. Those 20-cent
First
covers.
love.
If I see 20 cents on it, I just go crazy. Marvel. These Marvels and these 20 cents and the 25 cents era was really good. 30 maybe started to go a little bit down because the talent pool was thinner then, and things were changing, but always a good look down history lane here. So, Kurt, wanted to wrap us up. We're going to be working on the Turbo teaser, and check that on our other channel soon, The Making of Turbo Pit Fighter, because we're coming to our first kind of like 6-issue mini zine, and we're calling it our Turbo teaser. I'm just doing the back cover right here. And
6 pages, not
Kurt, am
6
I
issues.
inking
6
this back
pages.
cover, or are you inking the back cover?
I can ink it. I'm more than happy to ink it. Take some of the pressure off of you to get the Turbo Teaser 6-pager lettered.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pencil this nice. And are there any other text that you need besides Turbo Pit Fighter teaser #1?
Well, we'll talk about that. Yeah, we're just going to close this episode down. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you have comics you want us to look into, we have a community tab. We have the comments below. In the community tab, we also have polls. We're having discussions about comics, making them, reading them, collecting them. So please, if you made it this far, you're what we refer to as a turbo knot, like an astronaut, but you're a turbo knot. So I just want to say thank you for making it this far and being a part of our growth as comic book artists. Every Sunday, Jake and I get together. But that's all I got, Jake. Let these people get back to comics. What do you got?
See you next Sunday, man.